Hi, Jeff Spira here. I get this question all the time: stitch and glue or ply-on-frame? Well, I thought I'd fill you in to determine which boat is better for you, which method, I should say, of building a boat is better for you. I have designs in both of these, using both of these methods. So, early in my business, I kind of split. I had both designs. And I think that they're both excellent methods to design and build boats. So, but my opinion of them has kind of changed over time. So I wanted to, I wanted to talk to you about why I've come to these conclusions about these boats. The stitch and glue designs never really sold. I've got two boats that are Mackenzie River Western style drift boats. One of them's called the Mackinac, and it's a 13-footer, and then I've got another one called the Riverman, which is basically the same size. It's just slightly bigger. It's a 14-footer, but it's basically the same style and class and shape of boat, and will perform just exactly the same. So, I've sold maybe 8 sets of plans for the Riverman in 20 years. As far as I know, I think I only have 2 of them that I have pictures of, so that I know they've been built, but I'll put them up and so you can kind of see. They're good boats, but I probably sell 8 sets of plans for the Mackinac every year, and I've been doing that for 20 years. I mean, it's a lot of boats get built. I probably have pictures of 50 or more of them. So, I mean, they sell well, and whereas the Riverman just really doesn't. So, back in, I think it was 2004, I kind of became interested in Ren Tallman's skiffs. I bought his book and studied his designs and all that. It's a stitch and glue design. It's a V-bottom, he calls it a skiff, but it's really a V-bottom boat. So they're fairly popular in Alaska. Some commercial fishermen build them, that sort of thing. I kind of analyzed his hull from the viewpoint of a mechanical engineer, which I am, and of course I know some of you know that. So I saw some issues there that I didn't really consider appropriate. Now, well, I mean, not appropriate. That's a bad word. I would just say they're not as strong as they could be. Let's put it that way. But they're used in Alaska, and that's where fish boats need to be sturdy. They need to be strong and sturdy, and all that. So I have some experience with stitch and glue commercial fishing boats. I built Radden craft back in the early 1970s out of Morro Bay. I knew Mike Radden personally, and the area where I was docked with my boat, they built Radden boats there. There was the owner of that facility built quite a few Radden craft. And so I helped him build on occasion, and I worked with him on some different size Radden boats. So now the Radden is a good, really, really sturdy, deep V planing offshore fishing boat, and they use it for dive boats a lot. So they go out to the islands, the Channel Islands, and they go, around Morro Bay. They used them a lot for abalone diving and urchin diving at the time. So so I learned. I took some of the experience I had with these Radden boats and built it into the Tallman style skiff. So, and came out with 3 designs, which is a much stiffer hull than Tallman's. And I thought it would be more appropriate in the pleasure boat kind of sizes to make a really, really sturdy boat. In 3 sizes. The largest was a 20-footer, which was equivalent to Tallman's initial boat that he had, his initial skiff, and I called it the Californian. And then there was a smaller one, an 18-footer called the San Diegan, and a smaller one that was a 16-foot that I called the Newporter. There was also another boat, and it was called a Predator, and I'm forgetting who who designed it, but it was similar to that 20-foot Californian and the 20-foot Tallman skiff. And it was a fairly popular boat, but the builders I talked to that built it just said the plans were just pretty poor. I mean, he had a lot of trouble building it. He said they were really rough estimates, and he had to do a lot of the, secondary design himself, when he built it. So, I maybe only sold 3 sets of those plans in the first 10 years. Those 3, the Californian, the San Diegan, and the Newport. The first one that I knew was built was a San Diegan. It's the only one I know of that's ever been built. It's an 18-footer. It came out very nice. The guy did a beautiful job on it. And that was it. In more than 10 years, from 2004 to 2014, like I said, I maybe sold 3 sets of plans, and there was 1 boat built. So I took them off the website. I just took them down. I was redoing the website, and I thought, this space could be better used for some of my newer designs. So, but a bunch of people wrote to me in emails and said, "Oh, you got to put them back up. They're great. I want, I was thinking about buying one and this and that." So I put them back on, and I've sold a few since, not very many. One was to a guy in Florida that built a Newporter, and it came out great as well. I mean, it's a beautiful boat, and I got a video of it, cruising offshore, and it's a really nice boat. As far as I know, no one's ever built a California, another 20-footer, and I've only maybe sold 3 or 4 sets of it in all 16 years it's been up. So, well, they don't sell, and so I really have discontinued designing stitch and glue boats. I just don't do it anymore. In the past decade or so, stitch and glue boats are harder to design than ply-on-frame, for me anyway. You've got to do it in 3D CAD. Now I was fairly proficient at SolidWorks, which is a 3D CAD program but I've really haven't used it much in the last 10 years, and so I do all my ply-on-frame boats in 2D CAD, because I've been doing 2D drawings for everything from shipyards and offshore drilling rigs, going back 40 years. That's how I originally learned, and it was it's just a fancy version of drawing them on sheets of paper on a drafting machine. So anyway, I still use 2D CAD for the ply-on-frame boats, and don't use the 3D much anymore. So anyway, the smaller stitch and glue boats sell okay. My Mission Bay is an 11-footer. It's pretty popular. And the 15-foot Gloucesterman that only weighs 42 pounds. It's a rowing dory. It's pretty popular too. But the larger boats, again, they just don't sell. So I have to sell a lot of boats because I keep the prices down to have it make it worthwhile my design time, because otherwise I'm not making any way less than minimum wage on them, even over decades. So anyway, so for stitch and glue boats, the plywood panels are laid out in accordance with the plans, and then cut out in various odd-looking angles and panels. And when they attach to each other, edge to edge, they form the shape of the hull. So then what you do is you drill holes in each panel very close to the edge, and then you thread through the old way was a piece of copper wire would be put through there, and you'd create a little stitch, and twist it together, and that would hold the panels edge to edge together. Right, the corners would form a joint there. So nowadays they use a lot of electrical zip ties. So they hold wire bundles together, and they're inexpensive. They're easily available. The problem with the copper wires, you probably ought to take it out. Originally I used to leave them in, but you probably ought to take it out because they can migrate and poke holes in the boat. And over time as it vibrates and everything else. But a zip tie, all you got to do is cut it off flush, and it's you don't have to worry about taking it out ever. So. The inside of stitch and glue boats has bulkheads or formers, or you could even call them a type of frame that are stitched in to stiffen the structure once it's assembled, once it's bonded in place. So these are glued in, or stitch and glued in exactly the same as the sides are to each other. So and that serves to stiffen the hull and make it stronger and all that. So once you put the stitches in there, they're tightened just enough to remove the gaps in the ply, and then you mix a mixture of epoxy, and you thicken it so it gets pretty heavy or thick, about the consistency of peanut butter, and then you butter it on the joint, and you kind of fillet it in there. You kind of make a radius on the inside of this goop, this spackle, whatever you want to call it, of ply. So, and then over that you lay a piece of fiberglass tape, and then epoxy down the tape. So you build this joint in the edges. So you edge joint it together. So, and then the tape could be one layer in the little boats, or it could be 3 layers in the bigger ones that I recommend too. So, and then the epoxy sets off, and the joint stiffens up, and it attaches together, and the hull gets nice and stiff. So you then peel the tape. I tape up the outsides first to keep the goop from running through. And then you peel that tape off the seam, and then you do exactly the same on the outside. You build it up with some thickened epoxy, and then you cover it with fiberglass tape, and then glass that down, or put some epoxy on it to seal that down. So anyway, so if you're building one of the larger stitch and glue boats like the Californian or the Newport or San Diegan, you would have to fiberglass both the inside and the outside for strength. When I was building Radden boats, we put mat and roving, and we just have to staple it all down because we were using polyester resin, so it would all be stapled down to the plywood, and then we'd use big heavy staples, and the mat and roving are very, very much thicker than fiberglass cloth. So and then you'd soak it out, each layer independently with polyester resin, and build up these very thick layers, inside and out. So when you do the inside, you've got to it's a little tougher. You've got to set the boat vertically up, and so that you work on one side, because it's hard to reach the middle. Some of these boats are 8 feet wide, or close to it, 7 feet wide, and so you can't really reach over the side and get into the middle. So the best bet is to set them up vertically, on their side, and then you can do the side and the bottom, and then the panel, half the panels, and then you flip them over on the other. Let that epoxy go off. And it'll have to be in several layers typically, and then you flip it up the other way, and then do the other side and the other bottom panel and the other half of the bulkheads inside. So the smaller stitch and glue boats don't really need fiberglass if you use good quality marine plywood in them. So you can get away without glassing the small boats, or if you wish, you're certainly, if you're trying to keep them light, you would not want to glass them. But if you're just using inexpensive ply, for instance, you might want to put a layer of fiberglass on the little boats, the ultralight boats, what I call ultralights. They're somewhere between 40 and 65 pounds, something like that. So. And the fiberglass will add some weight to it because it's not, glass and epoxy are pretty dense. They're not as light as wood. So. Next come the ply-on-frame boats. You know, every boat I've designed in the last 15 years, a ply-on-frame boat. You know, it's really a unibody composite structure that I kind of pioneered. You know, many of my early boats, like the Carolinian and the Nova Scotian, were designed just like that, and then I've designed more and more boats with that same structural method since. So these have been around for 25 years. There's probably been, I don't know exactly, but between 3,000 and 5,000 of my boats built in those 25 years. So these hulls are extraordinarily sturdy. They're really tough, and you know, that's the way I designed them, of course, because you know, as I say, I'm a mechanical engineer and I've done a lot of marine structures, so I understand what's needed out there in the ocean. So you know, they come in displacement hulls, semi-displacement hulls, which means that they can plane under some conditions, and then fully planing hulls, of course. So this is begun by building a frame where I specify each element of the frame and how to put it together, and you build these pieces of all straight pieces of lumber, and then you cover the frame later after you've completed it. By bonding a plywood skin on it. You bend the plywood skin around and use the frame as a pattern to you know, draw out the shapes of the panels on the plywood, and then you cut it out and glue it and screw it in place. If you've seen some of my things, you realize the screws aren't really necessary. It's really the bonding of the glue that takes care of it. But these ply-on-frame boats, you know, the quality they'll do it depends on your woodworking techniques. You know, these are not difficult. You know, you can make a lot of errors while you're doing it. It's not as sophisticated as you might think. If you follow the instructions in the ply-on-frame manual and be careful, you know, how you fare the boat before you bond the ply on the outside, and use a glue that fills gaps like thickened epoxy or waterproof polyurethane. You know, you can see my videos on materials and glues and stuff. There's a number of them. So anyway, if you follow all those rules, you make a very sound boat. So, you know, I use very simple joints, and I use, if you want to up the type of joints, like go into a half lap instead of a full lap joint, or you know, scarfing the ply instead of using butt blocks on it or things like that, you know, go for it. Hey, it's great. It makes it a sturdier, you know, more sophisticated structure, but it's not necessary because I designed the strength of the boats to be built with these ultra simple joints using low quality wood. So just construction grade lumber that you buy in Home Depot. So you know, anybody who has done any kind of woodworking, you know, if you've built, you know, houses or barns, or done any finished carpentry around your house, or built any basic furniture or anything like that, or even patio tables for the outside, you have the skills to build one of my boats. Just you'll have zero difficulty in it. You know, hundreds of guys have done it, thousands really, and just are just amazed at how easily they come out using my construction methods. So, you know, some people will say that building stitch and glue boats is easier. Well, maybe it is. You know, the woodworking for stitch and glue boats is ultra simple. You just lay out the pattern on plywood and then just zip it out with a skill saw. It's like you know, cutting a pattern out to you know, for sewing. You know, if you're going to sew a garment, you know, you just lay the pattern down and draw around it and then cut. You know, so. The skill in building one of those stitch and glue boats, though, is really working with plastics, so not woodworking. It means that you have to know how to measure out the precise amounts of epoxy and hardener, how to mix it correctly, right temperatures, the right timing, how you add the filler, what consistency you're looking for, how to putty it on and cover the fillets with fiberglass, and how to saturate the tapes when it's on there so you don't have any bubbles and that sort of thing. If you mess up any of these activities, your boat will have structural defects. It's not going to fall apart maybe, but it won't be as strong or as long lasting as it's supposed to be. So you may not even be able to detect these things if you mix the epoxy incorrectly or not fully or things like that. So if you're an experienced fiberglasser, these are easy tasks. But if it's new and different to you, these are skills you need to learn. Some people will say that a stitch and glue boat is lighter. Well, in the smaller sizes, you're absolutely right. I mean, there's no way you could build a Gloucesterman, for instance, a 15-foot ply-on-frame boat and carry it around with one hand. It's just not in the cards. But my design, it's like I said, it's 42 pounds. You carry it to the dock like a off the top of your car, like a suitcase. You just pick it up with one hand. But in the larger ones, the glass and epoxy is dense, it's heavy, and you're glassing the inside, so it's heavier than wood. So do you save much weight? Maybe a little, maybe not. It depends on the boat and how you build it and everything else. But is saving weight a good thing in a boat? A lot of times you want to add weight. A lot of my hulls, I recommend people carry at least a case of beer in them, because especially the dories and things, because they need more weight than they have. You probably heard the term ballast. Well, that's a good thing in boats. So why would you necessarily want an ultralight boat? I mean, it makes it tow easier maybe, but okay. Some people will say that stitch and glue boats are shorter hours to build. I'll go along with that. That's true. You can build a stitch and glue boat in probably less hours than a ply-on-frame boat. But I don't figure people build boats just to knock them out as quick as they can. There's a lot of pleasure in the actual boat building process rather than kicking something out in the least amount of time. So a ply-on-frame boat is woodworking, though. You can work. I mean, I work in my bare hands, and the sights and the smells and the textures you feel by working with wood are I think are fun. They're interesting. They're nice. I work on boats in shorts and flip-flops. Sometimes. I wear these glasses all the time, and so I don't really wear extra safety glasses when I do woodworking, because these glasses are polycarbonate, like most of them these days. So they're safety glasses all by themselves. So when I'm using a sander, sometimes I'll wear a dust mask, one of those light ones that keep the dust from coming into your lungs. But it's not noxious fumes or anything like that. So but that's about it, as far as that goes. When you're building a stitch and glue boat, you got to wear rubber gloves. You need safety glasses that cover the sides, because epoxy in your eyes is going to be a huge problem. You should cover your hair, the top of your head, because if you, like me, scratch your head sometimes inadvertently, you don't want to get epoxy in your hair, So, or I do this to my nose sometimes, and if you're not paying attention, all of a sudden you've got a wad of thickened epoxy on there that you got to spend some time with acetone or vinegar or something getting off. So, fiberglassing and cleaning things off is, not near as fun as like smelling a block of, on a block plane when you're taking off a nice curly piece of hardwood. It's a completely different experience. So if you're wondering why I don't have more stitch and glue boats in my catalog, it's because, first of all, as I said earlier, they don't sell well, and I really don't care to build them that much. I'd much rather do woodworking than I would plastic working. I mean, it's just me. So anyway, how about you? Which style would you like? That's what I'm more curious about than what I've come to determine. So please put comments below. I'm curious to hear what you have to say. Then please like, share, and subscribe. And I'd love to open some discussions about what you think about this. So anyway, thank you for watching, and I'll talk to you again soon.